one of my favorite clients, Joel Elston, who's braved it all the way from Hanover, where it's a little bit snowier this March morning. And for those of you out there, please drive safely today. But we are going to talk about what is it all about to be a foster parent, to adopt from foster care. There's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of mystery about foster parent rights. And as an attorney that runs the Adoption and Surrogacy Law Center at Locke and Quinn, I have a lot of foster parents that come to me for advice in the area of foster parenting, especially with regard to what their rights are. Speaking of rights, if you are not familiar with the Raising the Bar Law Talk radio show, we have a fabulous website that has lots of legal resources on it, including lower cost and pro bono resources that are out there. And if you have not seen our show, the videos are uploaded to that page. The videos are also on the Locke and Quinn Facebook Live page. There are a plethora of different areas of the law that we've been covering, all the way from employment law to workers' compensation to adoption to surrogacy to medical malpractice, personal injury. So there is probably a topic of interest to you. Check out the www.raisingthebarlawtalk.com page for a lot of free information about the law. So good morning, Joel.
Good morning, Colleen. It's good to see you again.
Yes, you too. Great. Thank you so much for coming all the way down from Hanover through the snow this morning.
Surprisingly, it wasn't bad, but you never know. And Richmond traffic on a good day is not often good. But the drive wasn't bad, but it is snowing pretty heavy out there in northern part of this area.
Yes, and like a good Hanover County person, you have a truck.
Absolutely. If you're in Hanover County, you need a truck.
Exactly. So let's talk about foster parenting. In the last show, we talked a little bit more about what it's like to be a single dad and your story. And so we're coming back today because there is a lot of mystery about the area of foster parenting and what's involved. What prompted you to look into being a foster parent?
One of the things that, in my life, and I discussed my journey the last time on the show, and I won't rehash that, but one of the things that I had a need. I felt the need to be a parent along the way. A lot of chain of events happened, and I wanted to do that. And I'd had several relationships that never really felt like that would have been a really the appropriate way to go. And along the way, I said, this is a concept. There's kids out there without homes. I have a home.
Right.
I thought I had a couple of barriers in my background that would prevent me from doing that. But as I investigated, I realized most people could qualify.
Right.
The obvious things would rule people out, but I have a little bit of a history due to some addiction issues that I thought would prevent me from doing it, but it did not. You can get waivers and workarounds, and as long as you're of good character and you can minimally provide, it doesn't take much. I laughingly say the main part of it is having a good sense of humor and a thick skin.
Right.
And if you have those two things, a little space in your home, you can do this. And we have so many children that it's hard to comprehend. It's an easy thing to overlook. They're an undervoiced group that everybody wants to adopt the beautiful little blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby. There's a 3-month waiting list for that out there, but there's tons of 10 to 12 to 15-year-old kids that all they want in life is a family of their own.
They want a forever family.
That's it.
Yeah, and even at 16, 17, they still want a forever, even after they've aged out, as you might say.
Right.
They still want that forever family to come home for Christmas, Thanksgiving, to have there for the grandkids. Absolutely.
And one of the things that I have found amazing, and I just find endearing, is some of the better matches that I've actually seen take place. I'm aware of this 70-year-old lady. She decided to become a foster parent, and she's, this was in South Carolina. She's a Caucasian lady, and she ended up adopting the 16-year-old African-American female. And the story is amazing how the roles this 10 years ago, it was a great match. And now that the mother's older, now the daughter's now sort of the caretaker. And it's really a beautiful story. And sometimes older parents make a great match. So a lot of people think I'm too old to do this, or I don't have enough money to do this. And really, there are workarounds for everything, and it isn't what prevents. Most people would think what would prevent them from being a foster parent is not really a problem.
Right. So let's go back to one thing. I know in the last show that we did together, you shared the gambling addiction as part of your story, which is a really compelling story. And we talked a little bit about how any crime associated with gambling
Right.
is not what we call a barrier crime. So, in looking at adoption or foster parenting, let's take the mystery a little bit about what are the crimes that can prevent you from being a foster parent or adoptive parent, and those are what we call the barrier crimes,
Right.
and they normally have to do with assaults and sexual assaults and armed robbery, carrying weapons, using drugs, manufacturing drugs around children.
Right.
So there are a lot of things that don't bar people from adopting. And in fact, I had one client who had the misdemeanor of throwing the coins out of the car in a road rage. And he was charged with attempted assault with a missile. Yeah. And that misdemeanor, though, after 10 years is forgiven.
Right.
So folks that think they might not be able to adopt or think they might not be able to be a foster parent really need to, that because they have something in their background, really need to look a little bit deeper just to see, is that truly going to be a barrier to them or not?
Exactly. And the DSS website has several, they get very clear on what the barrier crimes are. But as you're saying, the obvious stuff, inappropriate behavior with children, child pornography, any of that stuff, you're clearly, no shot. You shouldn't even consider it.
Right. Sex offenders, not going to happen.
Yeah, not going to happen, and you should be arrested for trying. But as far as my charge was a felony theft charge, and it was in 1995, and the factors that they looked at was it was nonviolent.
Right.
And I'm not minimalizing it, but it was a nonviolent
right.
event.
And it didn't involve children.
It didn't involve children.
Right.
And I made complete and full restitution. My rights to bear arms, my rights to vote, have all been restored.
Okay.
So all those are factors when they're looking at doing it. So even a felony charge can be not necessarily removed or overlooked, but it can be taken in consideration. You can't have a felony today and adopt tomorrow, no matter what the felony is. You can't. But if you have a period of time in there, and I had to turn my life around in a great way and was able to demonstrate I'm a productive citizen. And as I tell people, I think my past makes me a better parent. So in a sense, I make it a skill set with today. But it is something that I encourage people. If you feel drawn to do this, don't self-limit. Don't. Most things can be worked around. Again, you can't rob a bank and then adopt with a gun, and that can't be done. Adopt a child, but what most people face, possession of marijuana 25 years ago is not going to keep you from adopting a child.
Right.
And that's and on a side note with that, Colleen, too, and I encourage anybody that gets to that point of process, don't lie about it either.
That really can compound things if you do that.
That's what makes it worse. If you're honest and said, look, yes, in college I got busted with a bag of pot. Just put it out there, because trust me, the background investigation is going to find even things that you weren't convicted of. They'll find the arrest, and you're going to have to explain it. So, but don't worry about it.
Yeah. So besides a criminal background check and a Child Protective Services background check, what else let's talk about what else gets done in terms of clearing somebody to be a foster parent.
Most all states, and the two states that I fostered in, South Carolina and Virginia, both require a certain amount of training, and the training varies. I actually went through an agency to become a therapeutic foster parent, and that can be relevant in our discussion later. And a therapeutic foster parent is trained to take some of the more severe cases, deal with the issues that come along that are not typical in all children. I happen to believe everybody should have the same training, because there's no way that these kids aren't going to have some issues, but that's a side note. The home study is a process that most people get scared of or worry about.
Right.
And the home study is basically probably the most thorough investigation you could go through. You have a social worker that comes out, and they literally go by step of your history.
Yes.
And
I tell people too, they're not doing the white glove test. They're not taking the white glove and checking if you dust it,
right,
all the chair railing.
Right. In fact, they're putting on another glove, if you know what I mean for that. This is but this process is necessary, and while it may seem invasive, I'm glad they do it, and because they literally go through your history and they verify that with different people. I have. I believe it was 5 references for people that I've known, and I was able to provide references from people I've known over 20 years. And they look at all that and they check. It isn't like I want to provide it. They literally check and they ask the people to write a letter on your behalf.
Right.
So it gets to the point of making sure that they check your income. Now, I don't want to scare people off with that, but you have to be able to minimally afford, and it doesn't mean you have to be wealthy, but they check your income. They check a lot of things. They don't check your credit, but if you're in a position of clearly not having the means to support, then that would be a factor as well. So they look at all areas of your life. I also had to go through. This isn't just because I'm 55 at this adoption. I had to go through a very thorough physical, and the doctor had to attest that I'm expected to live a normal life.
Right. Well, even I mean, with the foster adopt home studies in Virginia, even if you're in your 20s,
Right.
they still want to make sure you're not going to die of cancer.
Right.
You're not in a stage
Right.
that you might not make it a year or two. Yeah.
Right. And the process, in my process this time, was probably from training. I started the training in January, and it was probably about June before the entire process was complete. And I don't know if that's standard for everyone here, but that's everyone I talk to sort of feels that way. I was approved in the 1st of June, so it was about a 5-month process to get all of this done.
Yeah, then it's about average. And I would say I tell people at a minimum, expect a minimum of 3 months, and that's moving pretty quickly.
Right.
But 3 to 6 months is going to be that time frame. Now, you do get a little bit of assistance as a foster parent in terms of some subsidy money.
Right.
But then again, they're looking at your finances and saying, well, that's taking care of just you and whatever immediate family might be in the household. Now we're adding a child.
Right.
So it's expected that there will be some subsidy money. But some people think that foster parenting is all about getting checks from the government. Tain't so, right?
No. Well, and one of the things, in my lifestyle, the money that I get, while it's appreciated, it doesn't cover a week of Taekwondo school,
right?
So and we compete we're a traveling Taekwondo squad now. So.
I understand Justin either went to nationals or is he about to go to nationals?
Right. He qualified to compete at nationals. Wow. He won a gold medal, and he's champion of North Carolina in his age group. So we're very proud of that. So.
And the subsidy money does not cover all of that.
No, in fact, I just bought our plane tickets to Salt Lake City for July. So it did not cover my plane ticket, much less Justin. But again, the money there's a little bit that comes in with every foster care child. To me, the more valuable piece that comes with this, and being an independent businessman and self-employed, insurance personally is just an ongoing thing for me, just having to pay for my own insurance. The thing that you get Medicaid with these children.
Right, even after they're adopted.
And it can continue until they're even in college. As long as up to 21, as long as they remain in college, but definitely till 18. And while Medicaid may get some knocks of, but when it deals with children, Medicaid is the gold standard. They pay for everything: medication, full dental, counseling.
Yeah.
They pay for everything. So to me, that's the more valuable of the things that comes to play. Personally, I've gotten Justin off almost all of his medications since I've adopted him. But when he came in, he was on 4 or 5 medications alone. That would have been $600 or $700 a month. Yeah,
really expensive. So let's talk about the incentive to be a foster parent, because I'll have clients come to me, or potential clients come and say, well, their goal is to adopt, and they say, what about foster parenting? And I will say, you don't go into foster parenting with the goal to adopt. In fact, the goal, when you become a foster parent, you sign an agreement, and your goal is to do whatever it takes to return that child to their biological family, if that is feasible. Right. And so let's talk a little bit about that and the mindset of what goes on, because you've adopted 3 children out of foster care.
Yes.
One you successfully helped reunite with his biological family.
Yes.
And going into foster parenting, not with the goal of adoption, is something that people really need to be aware of, because you do start to attach to the child, and it's hard because you sign an agreement. The goal is for you to work with the Department of Social Services or the Department of Child and Family Services, whatever it's called in whatever state. And your goal is to work with them and go to those meetings with the biological parents, if reunification is possible.
Right.
Or even maybe placement with a relative as an alternative. So let's talk about how that kind of tug of war in your heart.
Well, and not that I want to disagree, there's a little bit of a difference there, especially when you're adopting or going in. You can go into foster care with the concept of, I do want to adopt, with the idea that you're going to have to only allow children whose rights have been terminated. You can do that.
And that is where you have specifically said that I'm taking a child out of foster care where the biological parent rights have been terminated. Right. Exactly. So that is a good distinction, Joel, because those children now are what we call freed up for adoption.
Right. And then after my approval process, as those that know my story, I lost my son TJ in a car accident several years ago, and I had when I decided to do this again, they presented me probably with 15 cases before Justin's case came along. And all of those cases had the potential of the child to leave the home. And I didn't emotionally think I could I was aware that I couldn't handle that, because what happens is, and just what you're talking about, to be a pure foster parent, to go in and you're not taking a child in whose biological parent rights have been terminated, which I think the first 2 children you fostered, they did not have the biological parent rights terminated. Right. And that was a different scenario than I did this time. So I had to be, in fact, my very first foster child, his name's Josh, doing very well, lives in South Carolina. He's old now, like 30. That scares me. I never remotely, I knew he would be going back with his family. That was in the plan. It was never going to be an option for him. So there was no, while I emotionally got attached to him, I always reminded him that he's going back to his family. His family had work to do. He successfully reunited with the family. It's hard to watch sometimes them going from a dysfunctional situation to your home back to a dysfunctional situation, even though the parents have made improvements. And the night before I took Josh back, he goes, I don't want to go. I said, buddy, I said, you can, and I give the foster care people credit in South Carolina. I had legal visitation with Josh, which is and his parents didn't argue. His parents agreed. They were like, no, he's a great influence. Let's keep that going. And remain in touch with Josh all these years later. So there are ways to do it, but it is, especially when it comes to babies, which, by the way, if I've never told you, I'm scared to death of babies. Babies scare me to death. That was never an option for me. But I can imagine when you get a little baby and you go through the bonding process, and then the parents or that dad randomly shows back up or whatever happens, there's horror stories that people who aren't prepared for that possibility, that's what makes it scary for a lot of people. Yeah, and I have clients that have taken in babies as foster parents, and the problem is that sometimes Department of Social Services will think that the child is going to probably be available for adoption, because given the situation in the biological family's household or households, it looks like this is not going to be a situation where these folks are going to be able to get their act together. They're not going to be able to get off the drugs, or they're not going to, they're going to be able to get off the alcoholic addiction or whatever it might be. And so I have folks that have been told this child will probably be available for adoption. And I'm always saying to folks that go into foster care, if the biological parent rights have not been absolutely terminated and the child is not completely freed up for adoption, you have to be guarded in terms of protecting your heart, because the first goal is to try to reunify the family. And things happen sometimes where that then comes about. And so
And even in the cases where the biological parents' rights have been terminated, I have seen DSS find a relative. And so those poor foster parents who think, well, now the biological parent rights have been terminated, we're going to be able to adopt this child, it's all freed up for adoption. And then DSS finds that relative, or DSS decides that we're going to put the 3 children from the one foster parent house and the 3 children from the other foster parent house all into one big happy family elsewhere. So it is tough being a foster parent, even in those cases where you think that you're going to actually be able to adopt the child.
Well, and that I've actually have witnessed in South Carolina in the courtroom, almost like a television show. The day of final termination and all this, the dad randomly show up, and the mom had exhausted her stuff. The dad couldn't be found, and the dad started the process all over again.
Right.
And it like a drama where he walks into the door and, I want my child, and the judge has no option, because it's always going to be, people assume it's always in the best interest of the child. It's always in the best interest. Their thought is the child being with the biological family is always in the child's best interest. Where I disagree with that premise, it is the law.
Right. And the first goal is return home and reunification.
Always.
The second goal is typically look to family and find a relative. And, that's what the poor social workers have to follow. And that's really the goals that they have to try to work toward, including helping provide those services, providing the meeting rooms, providing the counseling for the biological parents, providing all those support services for them to see, can we make this happen or not happen, you know?
And it's tough. It's tough for, I belong to several Facebook groups with people with foster parenting that have it going on. And I'm constantly seeing these posts about DSS is, threatening to pull the child out, put him back with the mom. I know it's not in the, and it's just, I don't want to sound callous, but it's just what is going to happen. And that's part of being a foster parent, is being prepared to watch something happen to a child you love that is not in their best interest, and it's not in their best interest,
right.
But you have to sit back and accept it and support the plan. You agree to support the plan, even though you emotionally may not support it. You have to support it as far as the child knows you're supporting it, if they understand.
Yeah, and I've actually had cases where we've filed an injunction to try to prevent the removal of the child, but the judges will typically lean toward the favor of whatever DSS has mapped out for the child, even though they've been in that home for several years, and you would think it's not the right thing to do. We are going to be headed to the break, and if you would like to call into the show, 804-454-1366. We are talking today about what is it like to be a foster parent. Again, that number is 804-454-1366. And we will be right back after the break.
You've been listening to Raising the Bar, Greater Richmond's premier law talk radio show. Call into the show with your stories and questions at 804-454-1366. 804-454-1366.
With SRN News, I'm Jeremy House in Washington. The suspect in the deadly string of bombings that terrorized Austin has blown himself up as authorities closed in on him, bringing an end to a 3-week manhunt. But police warned Wednesday there might be more bombs still out there. Talks over a $1.3 trillion government spending bill are almost complete as the White House and Capitol Hill Democrats ironed out details on a scaled-back first round of funding for President Trump's border wall. Nigeria's government now says 101 of the 110 schoolgirls abducted a month ago by Boko Haram are confirmed freed, and it indicates the release is not over. Nigeria's government has said no ransoms were paid in the release. Investors are cautious as they await the outcome of the U.S. Federal Reserve's first meeting under its new chairman, Jerome Powell, and his subsequent news conference. More details at srnews.com.
This is Jack from Banyan Hill. You like freedom? I do. You like money? I do too. If you like freedom and money, then you're gonna love Freedom Checks. You see, over the next few months, an estimated $34.6 billion is up for grabs to anyone who stakes their claim. Yep, you heard right. $34.6 billion. To get all the details, just go to www.freedomchecks123.com. Thousands of people are already lined up to cash in. Take Doug, for example. He's a 46-year-old from Joplin, Missouri, who's set to get a check for $24,075. And if Doug can do this, I've got a hunch that you can too. But here's the thing. If you want a chance to grab your full share of this $34.6 billion payout, you must have your ducks in a row by April 1st. So don't wait. Get over to www.freedomchecks123.com before the April 1st deadline. That's www.freedomchecks123.com.
WNTW listeners, we here at AM 820 and 97.7 FM The Answer would like to congratulate our listeners Keith, Randy, Ken, Guy, and Oscar for each winning one of the 5 $100 Ruth's Chris Steakhouse gift cards during our February contest. And we're excited to announce that we are extending the contest into March. That's right. Again, this March, there will be 5 winners. Just call into any of our participating live and local shows with your relevant stories, comments, or questions, and you will automatically be entered to win one of 5 $100 Ruth's Chris Steakhouse gift cards. You have another chance to enjoy an unparalleled dining experience at the Ruth's Chris Steakhouse located at the historic Belgrade Plantation. Again, on us, we're just saying thanks because we here at WNTW know that it's you, our listener, who makes our station great. Go to 820theanswer.com/radio for contest details. That's 820theanswer.com/radio for contest details.
Now, back to Raising the Bar. Call into the show with your stories and questions at 804-454-1366. 804-454-1366.
We are back. This is Raising the Bar Law Talk radio show, and I'm here today. This is Colleen Quinn. I'm an attorney with Locke and Quinn and the Adoption and Surrogacy Law Center, and I'm here today with Joel Elston. He's become one of my all-time favorite clients, and we're talking about what it's like to be a foster parent. Right before the break, we were talking about going into foster parenting and those situations where foster parents may think they're going to be able to adopt the child, but for whatever reasons, situations come about where the child actually gets removed from their home. And during the break, I was telling Joel about one of the cases I've had among many cases where the foster parent is thinking that they're going to adopt. I had one single mom. She had a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old sisters in her home for 2 years, and they considered her their mother. And then the biological parents went and had another child, a newborn baby who was drug addicted, so he's immediately removed from their home. And that drug-addicted infant was placed in a different 2-parent foster parent home. So Department of Social Services decided, call it right or wrong, there's different viewpoints on all sides of the fence, but they decided they would remove the 2 girls, the 2-year-old and the 3-year-old, from my client's home and put them in the home with the infant where there was a 2-parent family. And that I, as the attorney for my client, the foster parent with the 2 girls, we did try to file an injunction and intervene in that case. But the judge is left trying to weigh what's better for the kids. And unfortunately, those 2 little girls were abruptly removed from my client's home. She wasn't allowed to have any further contact with them. We know from attachment theory that that's not a good thing for kids, to abruptly remove them from somebody they consider their mom and have known, it's the only parent they've really known. But then again, you have to balance that with the fact that now they're going to be in a 2-parent household where they'll be able to grow up with their brother, and they're just not easy situations.
And that's becomes the hard part when you get into, because that's a trauma.
Right.
Your client basically lost her children.
It was devastating for her.
She would have to grieve as if there were a death. It's that bad. It
Exactly.
really is. and because they've been removed from her and she has no contact. It's no different than losing your child.
Not even any updates to see how they were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not, from my perspective, especially with my counseling background and working with so many kids, there's just not a scenario that, in my mind, that outweighs at least continued contact. And one thing that I happen to believe, and maybe I'm biased because I am a single parent, but two-parent homes are not always the best setting.
Right.
I know in my case, because of all three of my boys having, the manipulative behaviors and stuff, I can be that one consistent voice.
Right, they can't play.
There's nobody playing.
They can't play off of two parents.
Right, and while I love my kids, I also don't allow that, poor me or this or that mentality. So you don't have. Sometimes you can get more consistent parenting. So I know several DSS workers, caseworkers that actually look for single parents in certain situations because of that.
Well, a lot of these kids need some pretty firm boundaries. And so if you have one parent with one set of rules,
right,
it makes it a little bit easier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the idea that you can get, and just as you were describing during the break, while this two-parent family, I'm sure are great people, they now have added 2 more children to their plate. So
right, and they're already taking care of a child that was drug exposed,
right,
that's now going, through withdrawal.
Right. So you now have a situation that's much more chaotic. And I'm sure there's going to be behaviors by the other children. So it just becomes this cycle to watch, and sometimes the laws don't look, and oftentimes the laws don't take into account the absolute best interest of the child. And I know several guardian ad litems that are great people, but they get very frustrated because that they clearly can see that, and the judge will often side randomly with DSS, even if DSS is wrong.
Right. I have seen a lot of judges defer to DSS, and then most foster parents can't afford an attachment expert, and normally you need that attachment expert to show that there is a clear attachment and it's going to be detrimental to remove this child from this home where they are so attached to their foster parent. That's an area of the law that I'm always struggling with, because if a foster parent gets to the point where they sign an adoptive placement agreement in Virginia, then that child cannot be removed from their home at that point without a hearing.
Right.
So we have we're in a really good spot when they've signed that adoptive placement agreement. I'm like, if you can get to signing that adoptive placement agreement, now that foster parent's going to have many more rights, because now we have to have a hearing before that child is removed. But before they get to the point where they've signed that adoptive placement agreement, that child can be removed by DSS at any time.
Absolutely.
For any reason.
Yes.
And I even had a client who refused to sign the adoption assistance agreement. She had 2 little girls in her home for several years, and she asked if she could have an attorney review the adoption assistance agreement before she signed it, because we're talking about subsidy money for these kids, for until they turn 18, and in some cases 21. And so and then because she wanted to have an attorney review it, the DSS worker removed those 2 girls. And unfortunately, she didn't come to me until a year later. And at that point, the damage was already done.
Absolutely.
And it was too late to file an injunction with the court. But if I can get in and get that injunction before the child is actually removed, or the children are removed, then at least we have a shot at keeping the children put until we have a judge, hear the situation.
Well, and as you're describing, one of the things that I have seen, when you have personality conflicts, a lot of times the actual DSS worker, for whatever reason, will have in the majority, by the way, are really good people.
Fabulous.
Yes, I've never had this situation personally, but I have worked with families or helped families that have had a DSS, what I call was sort of a militant in their view. And the moment they were offended, well, I want to review it, they'll pull to punish the family, they'll pull the children out.
Right.
And it's not the idea that you should be able to have an attorney review that. And especially as you're talking about this, it's a substantial amount of money that in some people's lives, that's a big amount of money that would make a big difference.
It can make the difference whether they're able to actually care for the child. I mean, that subsidy money is there so that child can succeed.
Right.
And in some cases it could be that parent is going to have to go back from a full-time job to a part-time job in order to take that child to all the therapy and doctor sessions and occupational therapy, speech therapy, etc. And so that money can be critical to the success of the child, that subsidy money. And I get hired in a lot of cases to help folks fight for the subsidy money. And I'm always saying to DSS, look, this money is there for the success of this child.
Right.
These folks aren't trying to look to pad their pockets,
Well, it's there is a concept, and I'm not saying that these people haven't existed, but there's a belief that certain people get into foster care and they just want to collect the checks, or they want to do that. And again, in my world, it doesn't offset what we spend in a week. I mean, so but I know my case is not normal, but it is something that the majority of the people that I know that get into this are good people. This helps the child. With all of my kids, whatever amount of money I get every month, it goes into a special account for them. I won't touch it. When they're grown. I mean, I won't give them access to it
right.
They're 18, because Lord knows that would be pretty. But it will be used for either training or college. TJ, for example, took a class that some schooling that I used that money to pay for that. I was going to buy him a car with that, and so there's stuff that you can put that back, and that's how I view it. But there's other people that really need the money from the month to month, as you're saying. Getting today. Here's a great example. Schools canceled in Hanover County. I've had this with you, and I have patients I need to see today. So, I'm spending $100 to have Justin taken care of for the day,
right.
and that's awesome. I'm glad I'm able to do it. But that's just some people wouldn't be able to do that.
Yes. And another thing, when foster parents are looking to adopt and they're looking at the adoption assistance agreement and the subsidy money, is that I have seen many cases where they are only given the questionnaires that ask about their financial background,
right,
and not the questionnaires that ask about the kids' behavioral problems and issues. So there is something that Faces, an organization for foster parents, put out. It's a tool. So the topic, the item is called a VMAT. That's the tool that is used to assess what subsidy money will be available. And this is a parent's guide to the VMAT, which is a really awesome questionnaire that asks the parent specifically about all of the different behaviors of the child. Are they bedwetting at night? Are they getting up at night? All of their emotional behaviors, all the doctors and counselors and therapists, et cetera, that they're seeing. Special things that they might need. We had one kid, he was anything that was soft toys or whatever, he would chew up, and so he needed special teething equipment. And so it can be a variety of different types of pieces of equipment or tools or toys or learning toys, etc. So this wonderful tool, the Parent's Guide to the VMAT, really makes the foster parent who's looking to adopt the child sit down and list all of the different behaviors, the different needs of the child, et cetera, which then factor into the VMAT formula. And it's really important to not only look at the side of what can the foster parents that are now looking to adopt, what can they afford, what is their income, et cetera, but let's look at what this kid's needs are going to be, because those needs could be pretty substantial.
And that earlier I mentioned I was a therapeutic foster parent to an organization. And to me, the unfair part of this is if you have a child that's placed in therapeutic foster care and then they get adopted, get into adoption process, they're automatically given the VMAT scoring. They're automatically given that subsidy just because of the route they got there.
Right.
If you have a child that you're directly from DSS and is not in that process, you have to battle to even get them to score it and count it, or because in fact I've been told by some caseworkers just recently that we can't give it without going through the route of therapeutic foster care, which is not true.
Right.
But it's what they believe. And so that's where you come in, having to make these battles, which is a substantial amount of money. It's about double in most cases of what you get in just the subsidy.
It makes a huge difference if somebody's going to be getting $1,000 a month versus $400 a month. Absolutely. For that until that child's age 18.
Right.
And then if they're part of a sibling set, even though one child might have special needs and the other one doesn't, they automatically get the VMAT.
Right.
So, there are a lot of things here where you're going, wait a minute, why are we having to fight so hard? So we've got a child that's not a part of a sibling group. And we've got to fight so hard to get subsidy money for this child to succeed.
And that becomes the unfair battle. And that's an area we need to look at, because, I believe it's in most states, any child that's in foster care at 10 years of age or older is automatically considered special needs anyway. I mean, you're automatically in a position where you cannot adopt a child through any means without there being some trauma attached to that adoption. Adoption, while it's a great event, or for a family, it's a building of a family, it also represents the breaking up of another family, a loss of a family.
Right.
So there's a trauma attached to that. So I know with both Chris and TJ and as the stuff we went on, especially as they hit maturity, a lot of the issues came up, and I had to be very proactive and fight to get them the help they needed. And and it is something that not everybody is able to fight. And
right.
and also I've seen, when I go into battle, so to speak, in one of these, a lot of times, okay, just give it to him. It's just not worth the argument because he's not going to shut up. And so, but not everybody is a strong advocate in that way. I mean, a lot of times,
and you have to be delicate too.
Yeah.
You don't want to tick somebody off
Right.
to the point where you're going to,
right.
They're going to remove the child.
Right. Yeah. There becomes that balance. So that's an area that I hope can be improved on one day, where it's not about, this isn't about welfare or trying to give, the concept that if you look at the cost of keeping a child in foster care till they're 18 anyway, and the services that are being provided, it's still a much cheaper route. I know, I'm an advocate for, if a child's in foster care right now and they're 14 years old, and they stay in foster care, the state of Virginia will pay for them to go to a state college as long as their grades are up.
Yeah.
Now, if they get adopted, that's removed from them.
Right. And so that's a cost.
Right. So
to the state.
Right. Yeah. So in reality, in some ways, if you're looking at it from a financial benefit, you're better off saying, well, just keep fostering the child, but don't adopt them because you'll get college paid for. Well, that's
a silly incentive.
It's a silly incentive.
Yeah.
And so I just wish we could look at it that there is nothing better that can be done for a child that's in foster care to give them that permanent home, whether they're 15, 16, or 21. It's that, that concept that you have that home at Christmas to go to, that mom or dad to call when you break up, or just having that support system reduces. We're going to pay, in my mind, and it's funny because I have so conservative views in so many areas and what people view as liberal views. You're going to pay for this one way or another.
Right. And if you get that child into a permanent home, they are less apt to become engaged in criminal behavior, less apt to be homeless. I mean, there are just so many benefits that ultimately save the state and U.S. taxpayer with regard to really having saved that child. So the subsidy money is supposed to be there to help the child succeed. And I often tell clients too, there's subsidy money up to $2,000 for attorney fees.
Right.
So we charge $1,000 flat fee to finalize an adoption out of foster care. And then sometimes some of the subsidy money will be used if we have a celebration hearing, like we did with Justin,
right.
Your son. And but some of that money I can actually use as part of my bill to fight for the subsidies. So I'll tell people, look at the $2,000 for the attorney fees. That's automatic.
Right.
That should be automatically. But then let's make sure you fill out the parent's guide to the VMAT. Let's make sure we have captured every single possible thing that can go into the VMAT formula so that we spit out that number that is going to get you the greatest amount of money for this child's success. And a lot of foster parents are not aware that they have that ability to fight to get a little bit more money to help their child succeed.
And I always tell, no matter what financial position you're in, several of my friends have fostered and eventually adopted, and they're in great financial position. I don't care if you make $1 million a year. You need it's for that child. That
right.
money is for that child.
Yes.
It's just not. It's not a benevolent. Oh, I don't need that. Use that money. It's like, you need the Medicaid. For a while there was a big push to in some states, we don't want them on Medicaid. You get them on your own insurance, you lose Medicaid. Well, that fell apart quickly, and
yeah, because most of these kids have major medical and counseling needs, and with the cost of medical care.
Oh, you would never get them covered in a way that would be sufficient. So Medicaid is just a mandatory piece that goes along with them. And again, I'm not advocating these kids have done nothing to be in this position.
Right.
This is not, when you can argue, do we need this? Do we need that? For example, when, a foster care kid is placed in her school, he automatically gets free lunches. There's no form to fill out. You check the foster care box, they get free lunches. When the adoption was, you would laugh at this, when the adoption was legal for Justin, I immediately notified the school that we do not qualify for free lunches. Please remove him. That took a month to get him off of free. I had to battle the other side of that. Since we don't need it anymore. We don't need it anymore. But these things are in place, and being educated, being able to, and when I mean educated on the process, and have the delicate balance of advocating without scaring them off, without angering DSS.
Right, you don't want to have a clash with a DSS worker, and I've seen some of that, and I've seen it on the other side too, where the foster parent has a sense of entitlement, and I'm always like, look, you're in a delicate position. You can't come off with an edge or a sense of entitlement, and you really need to really try to do your best to work with this social worker, because you're all trying to work for what's in this child's best interest together.
That is the key, and with everything there are. I've seen a lady that was just convinced. The VMAT has different numbers attached to the scoring, and the higher the scoring, the higher the subsidy. Well, she had this young man that actually was rated way too high. I mean, he was getting, the subsidy was a large amount of money. Well, and they're looking at it and started to say, no, he's way too high. Well, she said, I'm not going to adopt him if I don't keep getting the subsidy. It's just. And they said, okay, we'll find. I mean, she
just locked in.
And that wasn't a reasonable position either.
No.
Part of one of the things that I've learned anytime that I'm doing these, but I have to be prepared that it isn't always going to go the way I want it to go.
Right. And there's a lot of give and take, and it's all in the balance of this child. So let's talk about another thing that's a mystery to foster parents with regard to what their rights are. And that is the right to attend the foster parent review proceedings, and also the right to hire an attorney to look at the case file for you, because otherwise foster parents are not allowed to look at the child's case file. And while they sometimes might get summoned to the foster parent review proceedings, or sometimes might get a report, they actually have become de facto parents. That is, they are parents, they've stepped in, they are parents in fact. And so I will say, you do have standing to attend the foster parent review proceedings and see what the goal is for the child now, see what's being reported to the court. And in addition, if it gets to the point where you need to hire an attorney, that attorney that they hire now can appear at the proceeding too, and also be able to review the case file with regard to the child. A lot of foster parents are not aware that they have that ability.
And I have seen cases where DSS workers have actually encouraged them not to be involved, and because of various reasons.
Right.
And I will speak from my personal experience again with all three of mine. I had workers that were total advocates for the child. They encouraged me to be there, and of course I spoke up. I was given incredible respect and standing as a parent at that point. So I mean, when I've had great experience with that, where everybody was involved, and the judge, I've actually was the one where they had a arbitration, and the judge there, this was with Chris, and the judge basically deferred to me over everybody. So, well, this guy's the parent at the end of the day.
You're with the kid every day.
Yeah. So let's, he knows what he's doing, and he just basically said, you tell me what you want, and so being able to do that is a necessary, in my mind, a thing, and you have that right. And again, implementing that, attending, speaking, but at the same time not taking it personally, and not getting on a standing of entitlement, or I'm gonna. It's just not going to work that way.
It's a delicate balance for foster parents to maintain, but it's important to know that they have that right to be informed. And they have the right, to attend those hearings and also tell the judge how things are going in the household with the child, et cetera. I mean, they're the ones that most immediately know the child's behaviors and how the child is progressing and doing, rather than having it reported as hearsay to the court. Having that foster parent there, the judge can hear right from the source of that de facto parent.
And when you read the case history of the child, I was amazed at, in Justin's case, it was a little different because I knew what I was doing much more, and I did a lot.
You were seasoned at that point. This was your third round.
Yeah, third round. But the first two, I read the case file, and as I got to know the kid, it wasn't remotely accurate. Some of the stories that were told about what happened didn't match the reality of what happened.
And I see some cut and paste going on.
Yes.
It's like cut and paste from the initial report, and then it's maintained. It's almost like medical records in some ways. Like the cut and paste. And then if the original report has some inaccuracies, then it continues to get reported for each subsequent foster care review plan.
Absolutely. And that's the piece for me that was to learn was, okay, that a human being is recording this from a perspective. And, there's certain kids that are likable and certain kids that aren't likable. There's certain kids. So a lot of times there'll be a bias in reporting toward the child of where, it not intentional, but again, if you're reporting on someone you don't particularly like and they're 12, they're 12 years old, you don't like how they treat you, the bias could be the other way too. And it's unfortunate.
So before we close out, let's just also mention the CASA worker, because sometimes there's a CASA worker involved that also is visiting with the child in the home, et cetera. And it's really important for the foster parent to cultivate a good relationship with that CASA worker, because that CASA worker is also filing a report with the court. And I don't know if you've had, not every case has a CASA worker put on it. So I don't know with any of your kids if you worked with a CASA worker.
All of them had one.
Okay.
Chris's and TJ's were delightful people who immediately just said that meeting me in the environment, said they became my biggest ally. Justin's CASA worker is a little wacky. He didn't, he acted like he really knew Justin, but I'm hearing him describe him going, have you ever met him?
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing with the guardian ad litem. Some of them have never met the child.
Right, yeah. So a lot of times you're looking at, but overall, they can be great allies. And when the more people you can get to be your advocate, and,
right.
And that's why it becomes so important to not, even though people may anger you, you have to walk that balance. You have to be, and then once they get on your side and they realize you do have that child's best interest at heart, 99% of the time, we're going to be in good shape.
Yeah. Including that guardian ad litem who's the attorney that's appointed for the child. That's another voice for the child that it's important for the foster parent to work hand in glove with.
The same way. Yeah.
Right.
They can be your greatest ally or your biggest thorn in your side. So, and understanding that's all part of it.
Right. And if everyone can just work in the best interests, the goal is the best interest of the child. Let's give the child stability one way or the other. If it's returned home, if it's moved for the goal of adoption. This has been a fabulous show talking to Joel Elston today about what it is like to be a foster parent. Join Michelle Luane next week when she talks about workers' comp issues. We're excited to invite Michelle back to the show. Have a great snowy day.